I stood in my own doorway at midnight, rain-soaked from my canceled flight, staring at the stranger sleeping in my bed. My son Jake crossed his arms beside me. "Mom, meet Carol, Emma's mother. She's staying in your room now." When I opened my mouth to speak, he cut me off. "She needs comfort after her divorce. If you don't like it, you can leave." I nodded slowly, pulling out my phone. Within minutes, they'd receive a notification that would change everything. The rain kept falling as I stood there, my mind racing back through the years. How had we gotten here? Just 15 years ago, I was a different woman, newly widowed and determined to give my son everything his father Robert would have wanted for him. Robert's death from a heart attack had shattered our world. Jake was only 22, fresh out of college, and I was 49, suddenly alone after 25 years of marriage. The grief was overwhelming, but I couldn't afford to crumble. Jake needed me to be strong. I threw myself into my work as a real estate developer, a career I'd built from scratch after getting my license at 30. Robert had always supported my ambitions, and now those ambitions would support our son. Every commission, every successful property flip, every development deal went toward securing Jake's future. The house we stood in now, I'd bought it with my inheritance from my parents, who'd passed within 6 months of each other just 2 years after Robert. It was a beautiful 4-bedroom colonial in Hartford's most sought-after neighborhood. 4,000 square feet of memories and dreams with original hardwood floors I'd personally restored, and a kitchen I'd renovated with my own hands during Jake's law school years. "Remember when you helped me sand these floors?" I used to ask Jake during his visits home from Yale Law. He'd laugh and complain about the blisters he'd gotten, but there was pride in his voice. We were a team then, mother and son against the world. I paid for everything. Every semester, every textbook, every parking permit. When Jake graduated summa cum laude, I was the proudest mother in that auditorium. My boy was going to be a lawyer just like his father had dreamed. The law firm of Patterson, Klein and Associates hired him straight out of school. I still remember his phone call, breathless with excitement. "Mom, I got it. The corporate law position, 6 figures to start." We celebrated with champagne on my back deck, toasting to Robert's memory and to bright futures. That's where everything started to change, though I didn't see it at the time. Success suited Jake, but it also hardened him somehow. The grateful young man who'd helped me through grief began to transform into someone I barely recognized. Then came Emma. I met her at the Hartford Children's Hospital charity gala 3 years ago. Jake brought her as his date, and I could see why he was smitten. Emma was stunning in a way that made other women feel invisible. Tall and willowy, with perfectly styled auburn hair and a smile that never quite reached her green eyes. She wore a designer gown that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payments. "Mrs. Patterson," she'd said, extending a manicured hand. "Jake has told me so much about you. What a beautiful event this is. You must be so proud to support such a worthy cause." Something about her felt rehearsed, like she was playing a role. But Jake was besotted, hanging on her every word, his hand constantly at the small of her back. When had my confident son become so eager to please? The wedding came just 8 months later. Emma wanted something lavish, and Jake insisted I help pay for it. "It's important for my career, Mom," he'd explained. "The partners' wives expect a certain standard." So I wrote check after check. $50,000 for a single day. The flowers alone cost more than my first car. Emma's dress was a custom creation from some designer in New York whose name I couldn't pronounce. 300 guests, most of whom I'd never met, dining on lobster and filet mignon at the country club. I sat at the mother of the groom table, watching Emma work the room like a politician. She knew everyone's name, their connection to Jake, their potential usefulness. When she looked at my son, I saw calculation, not love. But I kept my mouth shut. Jake was happy, wasn't he? After the honeymoon in Bora Bora, another $20,000 that somehow became my responsibility, things shifted rapidly. Emma had opinions about everything, especially my house. Tonya, she'd say, during their visits running her fingers along my kitchen countertops with barely concealed disdain, have you considered updating to quartz granite is so dated now? And these cabinets? They must be, 10 years old? 5, I'd correct her. I renovated 5 years ago. Oh, that dismissive little sound she made. Well, styles change so quickly these days. Jake started echoing her criticisms. Mom, Emma has a point about the master bathroom. That garden tub is wasting space. A walk-in shower would add value. Since when do you care about bathroom design? I'd asked, trying to keep my tone light. He'd shrugged, not meeting my eyes. Emma knows about these things. Her family is in interior design. Her family. I'd met them only once at the wedding. Carol, the mother, now sleeping in my bed, had been strangely aloof, spending most of the reception huddled with Emma and barely acknowledging my existence. The father was notably absent, allegedly traveling for business. The distance between Jake and me grew wider with each passing month. Birthday cards arrived late, if at all. Sunday dinners became monthly, then quarterly. Phone calls went from daily to weekly to, Mom, I'm in a meeting, can I call you back? But he never did. I told myself it was normal. He was building his career, establishing his marriage. All mothers went through this transition. But it hurt in ways I couldn't articulate, like a slow bleed I couldn't locate to bandage. Then came the night that should have been my wake-up call. I dropped by their apartment uninvited, bringing Jake's favorite homemade lasagna for his birthday. Through the door, I heard Emma's voice sharp and clear. She's so clingy, Jake. No wonder you're stressed. Mothers like that never let go. She means well, Jake had responded weakly. Does she? Or is she trying to control you through guilt? My mother says it's a classic manipulation tactic. I'd stood there, lasagna growing cold in my hands, waiting for my son to defend me, to remind Emma of everything I'd done, everything I'd sacrificed. Instead, I heard him sigh. You're probably right. I'll talk to her about boundaries. Boundaries. As if love could be parceled out in acceptable portions. I left the lasagna at their door and drove home in tears, but even then I made excuses. Emma was just protective of their relationship. Jake was under pressure at work. Things would improve with time. The universe gave me one last warning 6 months ago. Jake had come for dinner alone, Emma claiming a headache. He'd seemed nervous, fidgeting with his wine glass before finally asking to use my computer to print some work documents. Of course, I'd said, happy to have him home for any reason. I found him later in my home office, but he wasn't printing briefs. The screen showed a Google search, Elder Care Facilities Connecticut, and Power of Attorney Elderly Parent. When he saw me, he quickly closed the laptop. Research for a client? He'd said, not meeting my eyes. I'd wanted to believe him, needed to believe him. The alternative was too painful to contemplate. My son, my Jake, would never betray me like that. Looking back now, standing in my own home like an intruder while a stranger slept in my bed, I realized I'd been seeing only what I wanted to see. Every red flag had been there, waving frantically in the wind of my denial. The woman in my bed stirred slightly, and Jake shifted beside me, his expression hard and unfamiliar. This wasn't the boy who'd helped sand floors, who'd cried in my arms after his father's funeral, who'd promised to always take care of me the way Dad would have wanted. This was someone else entirely, and I was about to show him exactly what happened when you mistook a mother's kindness for weakness. The Seattle project had been in development for 2 years. As lead developer for the Hartford Riverside complex, I was finally seeing my biggest career achievement come to fruition. 20 luxury condos with river views, sustainable design, and price tags that would secure my retirement twice over. The 3-week trip was crucial for finalizing contracts with Pacific Northwest suppliers and meeting with potential investors. I remember packing carefully that morning 3 weeks ago, checking my list twice. Business suits, presentation materials, laptop contracts. Emma had called while I was zipping my suitcase. "Tonya, darling," she'd purred in that fake sweet voice she used when she wanted something. "Jake mentioned you're leaving town. How exciting for you." "Just business," I'd replied, instantly on guard. Emma never called me directly. "Well, I wanted to make sure you've given Jake a spare key. You know, for emergencies. What if something happened to the house while you're gone?" I'd hesitated. Something in her tone set off alarm bells, but Jake chose that moment to get on the line. "Mom, it's just practical. What if there's a leak or the alarm goes off? The management company would need access." "You have the garage code," I reminded him. "But not the house key. Come on, Mom. You trust me, don't you?" Those words. The manipulation was so obvious now, but then I was still the mother who'd believe her son hung the moon. I told him where to find the spare. The flight to Seattle was smooth, and I tried to push away my unease. The first week flew by in a blur of meetings, site visits, and contract negotiations. Everything was going perfectly with the project. The investors were enthusiastic, the suppliers competitive, and my commission would be substantial. It was day 8 when the strange text came through. I was reviewing blueprints in my hotel room when my phone buzzed. "Mom, Emma's mother needs temporary shelter. Her divorce is getting messy and she needs somewhere safe to stay for a few days. Is it okay if she uses the guest room?" I stared at the message. Carol needing shelter. The woman who'd worn Cartier jewelry and designer clothes to the wedding. But divorces could be brutal, and I wasn't heartless. Besides, it was only the guest room. "Of course," I'd typed back. "Tell her she's welcome. There are fresh sheets in the hall closet." "Thanks, Mom. You're the best." That was the last normal text I received from Jake. Days 9 through 12 brought increasingly odd communications. Jake's responses became shorter, more distant. When I asked how Carol was doing, he sent back one-word answers. "Fine." "Good." "Busy." "Is everything okay?" I'd finally asked on day 13. "Why wouldn't it be? You seem distracted. How long is Carol planning to stay?" The typing indicator appeared and disappeared several times before his response came through. "Not sure. Emma's handling it." Emma's handling it. Those words should have sent me on the next flight home. My neighbor Dorothy Chen tried calling on day 14. I was in back-to-back meetings and let it go to voicemail. When I finally listened that night, her message was concerning, but vague. "Tonya, honey, I don't want to alarm you, but there's been a lot of activity at your house, moving trucks and such. I'm sure it's nothing, but I wanted to check if you're having work done. Call me back when you can." I immediately called Jake. No answer. Emma straight to voicemail. I tried 3 more times before finally getting a text from Jake. "Mom, stop calling. We're handling some furniture delivery for Carol. Everything's fine." Furniture delivery. Why would Carol need furniture delivered to my house for a temporary stay? My business partner David Ung made everything worse the next morning. We were having breakfast before a crucial investor meeting when he pulled out his phone. "Hey, Tonya, isn't this your house?" He showed me a Facebook post from someone in my neighborhood's community group. The photo was grainy, but I could make out a large moving truck in my driveway. The caption read, "New neighbors moving in on Elm Street. Welcome to the neighborhood." My blood went cold. When was this posted? "Yesterday afternoon. Are you selling? You didn't mention anything?" "No." I managed my mind racing. "No, I'm not selling." I excused myself and called Dorothy directly. This time she answered on the first ring. Oh, Tonya, thank goodness. I've been worried. There's been so much coming and going. Furniture boxes, people I don't recognize. Jake's there all the time now, and Emma too. But when I went over to ask if everything was all right, Emma just smiled and said you'd approved everything. Dorothy, I need you to do me a favor. Can you take some photos discreetly? Of course, dear. Is everything all right? No, everything was not all right, but I kept my voice calm. Just a miscommunication, I think. I'll sort it out when I get home. The photos Dorothy sent made my stomach turn. My driveway was full of unfamiliar cars. Someone had changed the flower pots on my front porch. Through the window, I could see furniture that wasn't mine. I called Jake 17 times over the next 24 hours. Nothing. Emma's phone appeared to be disconnected entirely. Even my calls to Jake's office went unanswered, his secretary claiming he was in depositions all week. On day 19, Seattle was hit with an unexpected winter storm. The entire city shut down, airports included. My meetings were canceled, the final contracts could be signed electronically, and suddenly I found myself with a changed return date. The airline rebooked me on a red-eye flying out on day 20. I didn't tell Jake. Something in my gut warned me not to announce my early arrival. Instead, I messaged him that my flight was delayed and I'd be home as scheduled in 2 more days. No problem, he'd replied, the first response I'd gotten in days. Travel safe. As I packed my bags in Seattle, I thought about all the small betrayals that had led to this moment. Every dismissed concern, every ignored instinct, every excuse I'd made for increasingly inexcusable behavior. Dorothy's photos haunted me. Who were all those people in my house? What was really happening? The flight home felt like flying into battle. I spent the entire time reviewing Washington state property law on my laptop, a sick feeling growing in my stomach. The legal research sites I accessed painted a clear picture of what might be happening, but I refused to believe it. Not Jake. Not my son. But as the plane descended toward Bradley International Airport, I forced myself to face reality. The ignored calls, the strange messages, the moving trucks, Carol's convenient divorce, requiring shelter. It all pointed to one thing: they were trying to take my house. The question was whether I'd land in time to stop them. I thought about calling my lawyer from the airport, but something held me back. If Jake had truly crossed this line, if he was really attempting what I suspected, then I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed to catch them in the act. The Uber ride from the airport took 40 minutes. 40 minutes of my heart hammering against my ribs. 40 minutes of hoping I was wrong. 40 minutes of preparing for the worst. It was just after midnight when we turned onto Elm Street. My beautiful neighborhood looked peaceful in the darkness, porch lights glowing warmly, gardens winter quiet. Everything normal except for the cars crowding my driveway. 3 vehicles I didn't recognize, including a white Lexus with vanity plates reading Carol. "This is good," I told the driver, having him stop 2 houses down. I didn't want to announce my arrival just yet. I rolled my suitcase quietly up the sidewalk, noting the changes even in the darkness. My carefully chosen winter planters had been replaced with gaudy artificial arrangements. A tacky welcome mat I'd never purchased lay before my door, and when I punched in my door code, nothing happened. The lock had been changed. For a moment I stood there in the cold December night, locked out of the home I'd bought with my dead parents' money, the home where I'd raised my son, the home that held every important memory of my adult life. The betrayal was so complete, so stunning, that I actually laughed. A short, sharp sound that had nothing to do with humor. Then I remembered the spare key. Not the one I'd told Jake about, but the one I'd hidden years ago in a fake rock near the basement window. My hands shook as I retrieved it, praying they hadn't somehow discovered this secret too. The key slid in smoothly. The lock turned. I was in. What I found inside would haunt me forever, but it would also set me free. The house was dark except for a nightlight in the hallway casting strange shadows on walls that should have been familiar, but somehow weren't. My heels clicked too loudly on the hardwood floors as I set down my suitcase, and I slipped them off, padding forward in stockinged feet. The first shock came in the living room. My carefully curated furniture pieces I'd collected over 20 years was gone. In its place sat modern monstrosities in white and chrome, the kind of soulless designer pieces Emma had always pushed me to buy. My mother's antique secretary desk, where I'd written thank you notes for Dad's funeral, had vanished. The family photos that once lined the mantel were replaced with abstract art that looked like something a child might paint in anger. I moved through my violated home like a ghost, cataloging each erasure of my existence. The dining room where we'd hosted 25 Thanksgivings now held a glass table that screamed new money. My grandmother's china cabinet had been relegated to some unknown fate, probably a garage sale or dump. But nothing prepared me for the master bedroom. I pushed open the door to find a stranger in my bed. Carol Emma's mother lay sprawled across my California king, wearing my silk robe, the one Robert had given me for our 20th anniversary. My sheets, my pillows, my space all occupied by this interloper who snored softly in the darkness. The rage that flooded through me was primal volcanic, but before I could act on it, footsteps thundered up the stairs. "Mom!" Jake's voice sharp with shock. "What are you doing here?" I turned slowly to face my son, this stranger wearing my child's face. He stood in the doorway in pajamas. I'd never seen Emma beside him, in a negligee that left little to imagination, her face a mask of calculated concern. "My flight was canceled," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "I came home early. The real question is what she's doing in my bed." Emma flicked on the lights, and Carol stirred, sitting up with theatrical confusion. "What's happening, Jake?" "Mom," Jake said, crossing his arms in a gesture so reminiscent of his teenage years it made my heart clench. "Meet Carol Emma's mother. She's staying in your room now." "I can see that. And my furniture, my belongings." Emma stepped forward, her voice dripping false sympathy. "Tonya, we updated things a bit. Carol's going through such a difficult time, we wanted her to feel at home." "In my home?" "Actually," Jake interrupted, his lawyer voice clicking into place, "it's the family home. I grew up here too, remember, and as your only heir, I have certain rights." The words hit like physical blows. Rights heir. This was how he saw me now, not as his mother, but as an obstacle to inheritance. "I see. And where exactly am I supposed to sleep in my own house?" Emma and Jake exchanged a look I couldn't quite read. Then Jake straightened his shoulders. "She needs comfort after her divorce. If you don't like it, you can leave." The silence that followed was deafening. Carol watched from my bed with poorly concealed satisfaction. Emma's lips curved in a smile she didn't try to hide. And Jake, my son, stood there with cold determination, waiting for me to break. Instead, I nodded slowly and pulled out my phone. "What are you doing?" Emma asked, her voice pitched higher. "Just handling some business." I typed quickly, fingers flying over the screen. "Done." "Mom," Jake said, suspicion creeping into his tone. "What did you just do?" "Oh, you'll find out soon enough." I smiled, the kind of smile that had closed million-dollar deals. "Now, since my room is occupied, I'll take the guest room. Unless you've installed someone there too." "It's available," Emma said, carefully studying me like I was a puzzle she couldn't solve. I retrieved my suitcase and headed for the stairs, pausing at the landing. "Oh, Jake, you might want to check your email." The guest room had been transformed into a storage area, boxes of my belongings stacked haphazardly against the walls. I recognized my jewelry box, my photo albums, the quilt my mother had made for my wedding. They'd been picking through my life like vultures, deciding what had value and what could be discarded. I sat on the narrow twin bed, probably brought up from the basement, and allowed myself 5 minutes of grief. 5 minutes to mourn the son I'd thought I'd raised, the family I'd believed in, the future I'd taken for granted. Then I dried my eyes and got to work. First, I called my lawyer, Margaret Foster. We'd been friends since our kids were in preschool together, and she answered despite the late hour. Tonya, what's wrong? I need you to expedite that trust paperwork we discussed last year, the irrevocable one that protects the house. I thought you decided against it. You said Jake would be hurt. Jake just gave my bedroom to his mother-in-law and told me I could leave if I didn't like it. Margaret's sharp intake of breath was gratifying. I'll file it first thing in the morning. What else? Check if anyone's tried to file power of attorney papers with my name, and I need a locksmith here at 8 a.m. sharp. Tonya, are you safe? For now, but I don't think I have much time. After hanging up, I carefully photographed everything in the room. My boxed possessions, the changes to the house visible from the doorway, the general destruction of my life. Evidence, all of it, potential evidence. Then I crept back into the hallway. Jake and Emma's room was at the far end, and I could hear them talking in urgent whispers. But it was the home office, my former sanctuary, that drew me. The door was ajar, and I slipped inside. Jake's laptop sat open on the desk, documents scattered around it. Even in the darkness, I could see enough to make my blood freeze. Power of attorney forms with my signature, except I'd never signed them. Real estate transfer documents prepared, but not yet filed. Bank statements. My bank statements with withdrawals I hadn't made circled in red. And worst of all, a letter from a Dr. Harrison about my concerning cognitive decline and need for immediate intervention. I photographed everything, my hands shaking with fury and disbelief. They weren't just trying to steal my house. They were building a case to have me declared incompetent. A sound in the hallway made me freeze, footsteps slow and deliberate. I held my breath as a shadow passed the door, then continued toward the bathroom. Carol, probably. I waited until I heard the door close before making my escape. Back in the guest room, I examined the photos on my phone. The evidence was damning, but I needed more. I needed to understand the full scope of their plan. I opened my banking app using my fingerprint to access accounts Jake didn't know about. My main checking showed the suspicious withdrawals, nearly $30,000 over the past 2 weeks. But my investment accounts were untouched, protected by additional security measures I'd wisely implemented. The house notification I'd sent earlier would hit soon. Jake thought he had rights as my heir. He was about to learn that inheritance was something you received after someone died, not something you took while they still breathed. A soft knock interrupted my planning. Tonya, Carol's voice sickeningly sweet. May I come in? I stayed silent. I know you're awake. We should talk woman to woman. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. Carol stood there in my robe, looking nothing like the polished woman from Jake's wedding. Without her makeup and designer clothes, she appeared harder, calculating. Quite a shock coming home to changes, she said, inviting herself in. But change can be good, don't you think? That depends on the change. She sat on a box containing my winter coats, crossing her legs casually. Emma says you've been struggling lately, forgetting things, making poor decisions. It must be frightening. The only thing frightening is finding strangers in my home. Carol laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Stranger, I'm family now. Jake is like a son to me. In fact, he's the son I never had. Emma's father was useless, you know. Ran off when she was 10, left us with nothing. How unfortunate. Yes, well, we survived. Emma learned early that women need to be smart about security. Financial security, I mean. She's been so good for Jake, helping him see his potential. His potential to steal from his mother, Carol's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold underneath. Steal such an ugly word. Jake is simply being practical about assets that will be his anyway. Why wait for nature to take its course when you're clearly not capable of managing things anymore? I see. And you? What's your role in this practical arrangement? I'm just a mother helping her daughter. Surely you understand that? We do anything for our children, don't we? The irony of her words sitting in my violated home wearing my robe was staggering, but I kept my face neutral, channeling the poker face that had won me deals against developers twice my size. Indeed we do, I agreed, which is why I'm sure you'll understand what I'm about to do for mine. Carol's eyes narrowed. Threats, Tonya, that seems beneath you. No threats, just promise. She stood pulling my robe tighter. You should be grateful Jake's willing to care for you at all. Many children would have already put you in a home. How thoughtful of him to steal from me personally instead. Get some rest, Carol said, moving to the door. You look tired. Emma's worried you're not sleeping well. Confusion is often worse at night for people your age. After she left, I locked the door and wedged a chair under the handle. People my age, I was 64, not 94. I ran a multi-million-dollar development company. I'd buried a husband, both parents, and built a life from ashes. And they thought they could gaslight me into believing I was feeble. My phone buzzed. The notification had been delivered. In 12 hours, the house's utilities would shut off for non-payment. The notice would show months of ignored bills, except I'd set up auto-pay years ago. The only way to restore service would require my personal appearance at each utility company with proper identification. It was petty compared to what they'd done, but it was a start. Let them enjoy their stolen kingdom without heat, electricity, or water. I lay down on the uncomfortable bed, still fully dressed, and started planning. They thought they'd won, that I'd shuffle off to some apartment or care facility, leaving them to feast on my corpse. But I'd built this life one brick at a time, and I'd burn it down the same way before I let them take it. Sleep seemed impossible, but exhaustion eventually won. I dozed fitfully, dreaming of Jake as a baby, then a boy, then the stranger he'd become. When dawnlight finally crept through the windows, I was ready. The war for my home had begun. I woke to the sound of Emma shrieking from the master bathroom. The water had just cut off mid-shower, leaving her covered in soap. Phase 1 of my plan was underway. Jake, something's wrong with the shower. I listened to my son's footsteps thunder past my door, his voice muffled but clearly agitated. By the time I emerged dressed in yesterday's clothes, but looking purposefully disheveled, the house was in chaos. Morning, I said mildly, finding them clustered in the kitchen. Emma's hair hung in soapy strings. Carol clutched a coffee mug like a lifeline, and Jake was on the phone with the utility company. No, I'm the homeowner, he was saying, then his face darkening. What do you mean the account holder has to appear in person? I shuffled to the coffee maker, noting with satisfaction that it was already unplugged, the power having been cut precisely at 7 a.m. Problems. Emma whirled on me, her composure cracking. What did you do? Me. I blinked innocently, channeling every community theater performance I'd ever given. I just got here. Remember, you gave my room away. The utilities are shut off, Jake snapped, ending his call. All of them. They're saying there are months of unpaid bills. Oh dear, that's not like me at all. I always pay my bills. I touched my temple, feigning confusion. Or did I? Things have been so fuzzy lately. The look that passed between them was pure gold. They'd been building a case about my mental decline, and here I was seeming to confirm it while simultaneously sabotaging their comfort. Let them wonder if I was truly confused or playing them. We need to get this fixed, Carol demanded. I have a doctor's appointment this afternoon. Of course you do, I murmured, then louder. I'll go to the utility companies today. Clear this whole thing up. Just need to find my identification. It's in your purse, Emma said quickly. Too quickly. I'll get it for you. No need. I remember now. I moved all my important documents to the safety deposit box last month. Or was it last year? I smiled vaguely. Time just flies, doesn't it? Jake's jaw clenched. Without my physical presence and ID, they couldn't restore services. And my confusion about the safety deposit box meant they couldn't easily access whatever documents they needed for their schemes. The doorbell rang, cutting through the tension. Jake answered it, returning with my neighbor Dorothy. Tonya. She rushed to embrace me. I was so worried when I saw you come home last night. Is everything all right? Dorothy, how sweet of you to check. I held her hands, feeling genuinely grateful for one real friend in this mess. Just some utility mix-up. You know how scattered I've been lately. Dorothy's eyes sharpened. We'd known each other 15 years. She could read my signals. Oh, yes, you mentioned that when we talked last week. About the confusion and memory issues, so concerning at your age. Bless her. Dorothy was playing along perfectly. I should make a list, I said, pulling out my phone. Utility company visits bank verification doctor's appointment. Oh, Emma, didn't you want me to see someone about my memory? What was that doctor's name? Emma's face went pale. Dr. Harrison? Right, I should call him. Do you have his number? I'll get it for you later. Wonderful. Dorothy, would you like some coffee? Oh, wait, the power's out. I laughed, a confused little sound that made Jake flinch. Silly me. I keep forgetting things. After Dorothy left, promising to check on me later, I retreated to the guest room. But I wasn't idle. I'd hidden a small voice recorder in my pocket, a purchase made from the airport electronics store. Everything they said would be captured. The morning revealed the full scope of their planning. Through the heating vents, I could hear their panicked conversations. She knows, Emma hissed. She's playing us. No, Jake argued. You didn't see her face. She's genuinely confused. The memory issues are real. Then why did the utilities get shut off right after she arrived? Maybe she set something up before the confusion got worse. Automatic responses to perceived threats. We need to move faster. The doctor won't see her without insurance cards, Carol added, and we can't access those without her cooperation. Then we get her cooperation, Jake said coldly. One way or another. I smiled grimly, saving the recording. Evidence of conspiracy perfect for Margaret's files. The locksmith arrived at 8 sharp, just as promised. I met him at the door before Jake could interfere. Ma'am, he said loudly, I'm here about the security upgrade you ordered. Security upgrade. Jake appeared behind me. Mom, what's this about? I don't remember calling anyone. I turned to the locksmith with perfectly feigned confusion. Did I schedule this? The locksmith, clearly uncomfortable, checked his tablet. 3 weeks ago, ma'am. You said you'd be returning from a trip and wanted new locks installed. 3 weeks ago, I touched my chest. But that's when... Yes, I was going to Seattle. Wasn't I... Mom, Jake said tightly, send him away. We don't need new locks. But I must have had a reason. I insisted, then brightened. Oh, I remember now. Someone told me about break-ins in the neighborhood. Or was that last year? The locksmith shifted nervously. Should I proceed or not? Yes, I said. No, Jake said simultaneously. I'm the homeowner. I added, producing my ID with a flourish that suggested I'd just remembered where it was. Please proceed. Jake couldn't argue without looking like he was taking advantage of a confused elderly woman. The locksmith went to work while my son seethed behind me. At least give me a key, Jake demanded. Of course, sweetheart. I'll make copies tomorrow. Or was I supposed to do that today? I patted his arm. Don't worry, I'm sure I'll remember. The rest of the morning was a master class in strategic confusion. I called the bank to verify some strange withdrawals, sounding just bewildered enough that they froze the accounts pending investigation. I phoned my office to say I'd be taking time off for health concerns, ensuring my assistant would document any calls from Jake asking about my mental state. Emma tried cornering me in the hallway. "Tonya, we're worried about you. These memory lapses, the confusion about bills, the paranoia about security. It's not normal." "You're right," I agreed readily. "Something's definitely not normal in this house." "Let us help you. Jake found a wonderful facility, Sunshine Manor. They specialize in memory care." "How thoughtful. And I suppose you'd take care of the house while I'm getting help." Emma's smile was sharp. "Family takes care of family." "Indeed they do," I said, recording every word. By noon, the house was stifling without heat, despite the December chill outside. Carol complained constantly Emma snapped at everyone, and Jake made increasingly desperate phone calls to utility companies, banks, and lawyers. I floated through it all like a confused ghost, occasionally asking the same question twice or forgetting where I'd put something. But my eyes were always watching my phone, always recording. The real shock came when I overheard Emma on a call in the garage. She thought I was napping, but I'd crept down to photograph more evidence. "No, she's back early," Emma was saying. "The plan needs to accelerate. Yes, I have the pills. The doctor said increasing the dose would increase confusion. No, nothing traceable. It looks like standard sleep medication. Jake doesn't know. He doesn't need to." My blood turned to ice. They'd been drugging me. Those visits before Seattle when Emma insisted on making tea. The growing fatigue I'd attributed to stress. The moments of genuine confusion that had scared me into getting checked by my own doctor who'd found nothing wrong. I photographed the bottle of pills hidden behind paint cans, my hands shaking with rage. They'd been poisoning me to create symptoms of dementia. The depths of their evil stole my breath. "Tonya!" Jake's voice made me jump. He stood in the garage doorway, suspicion etched on his features. "What are you doing?" "Looking for light bulbs," I said vaguely. "The power's out, but light bulbs still work, don't they? Or am I confused again?" "Come inside, Mom. You need to rest." "Yes, rest. Emma makes wonderful tea, so relaxing." I saw him flinch and knew he'd understood. Either he'd known about the drugging or he was realizing it now. Either way, his reaction told me everything. Back inside, I made a show of lying down, then texted Margaret everything I'd discovered. Her response was immediate. "Get out now. I'm calling the police." But I wasn't ready to leave. Not yet. They'd stolen my peace of mind, my sense of safety, my trust in family. They'd tried to steal my mind itself. Running away would let them spin the story claim I was unstable and abandoned my home. No, I was going to stay right here and document every moment of their unraveling. The poker face phase wasn't just about pretending confusion. It was about letting them think they were winning while I built an airtight case that would destroy them. Carol found me in the kitchen that evening trying to make sandwiches by candlelight. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "Just call the utilities and fix this mess." "I went today," I said truthfully. But they said something about fraud alerts and investigations. Very confusing. The nice man said it could take weeks to resolve. Weeks. Or months. I can't quite remember. "Would you like mustard on your sandwich?" She stormed off and I smiled in the darkness. The house was cold, dark, and uncomfortable. Good. Let them feel a fraction of what they'd put me through. My phone buzzed with messages from Margaret. The police would need more evidence for criminal charges. The drugging was hard to prove without blood tests from when it was happening. But the financial fraud, the forged documents, the conspiracy to commit elder abuse, that was solid. I just needed them to make one more move, one final incriminating act that would seal their fate, and I knew exactly how to make it happen. Tomorrow I would discover the pills. Tomorrow I would confront them with shaking hands and tears. Tomorrow they would think I was broken enough to sign whatever they put in front of me. Tonight I prepared for war. The next morning dawned bitter cold, and the house felt like a tomb. Ice crystals had formed on the inside of the windows overnight, and I could see my breath in the air. I dressed in layers, grateful for my warm clothing, even as I heard Carol's complaints echoing through the vents. "This is intolerable!" she shrieked. "I'm freezing! Do something!" I emerged from my room looking appropriately fragile, clutching a shawl around my shoulders. In the kitchen, I found Jake trying to heat water on the gas stove, the only appliance still functioning. "Morning, sweetheart," I said, adding a slight tremor to my voice. "Is everything all right? The house feels different." "The utilities are still investigating," he said curtly. "It'll be resolved soon." "Oh, good. I was worried I'd forgotten to pay something important." I moved toward the garage. I need to find warmer clothes in my boxes. So cold. "I'll get them," Jake said quickly, but I was already through the door. "No need, dear. I remember packing my wool sweaters somewhere." I made a show of searching through boxes, gradually working my way toward the paint cans. "Oh, what's this?" I held up the bottle of pills, letting my hands shake visibly. The label was partially obscured, but the pills inside were clearly visible. "Sleep medication. But I don't take sleeping pills." Jake's face went ashen. "Mom, those are probably Emma's." "Behind the paint. How strange." I opened the bottle, sniffing. "They smell familiar, though. Like tea." Emma appeared as if summoned her face a mask of false concern. "Tonya, you look tired. Why don't you come inside?" "Emma, are these yours?" I held up the bottle. "Jake says they might be, but why would they be hidden?" I sometimes have insomnia," she said smoothly. "I didn't want to leave medication where children might find it." "We don't have children here," I said, confusion evident in my voice. "Unless, am I forgetting grandchildren?" "No, Mom," Jake said quietly. "No grandchildren." I studied the pills more closely, then gasped. "These look like the vitamins you gave me, Emma. The ones for mental clarity. You said they'd help with my memory." The silence was deafening. Emma's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Jake stared at his wife with dawning horror. Even Carol, hovering in the doorway, seemed to realize something had shifted. "I haven't been taking vitamins, have I?" I asked, letting tears well in my eyes. "What have I been taking?" "Mom." Jake started, but I cut him off with a sob. "You knew. Both of you knew." I clutched the pills to my chest, performing heartbreak with every fiber of my being. My own son, my own family, poisoning me. "It's not poison," Emma snapped, then caught herself. "I mean, those aren't—" "You're confused." "Yes," I agreed, letting my voice break. "I've been so confused. Ever since I started drinking your tea. Ever since you started caring about my health." I stumbled back into the house, noting with satisfaction that my performance had drawn Dorothy to her window. Good. Witnesses were always helpful. In the living room, I collapsed onto their ugly modern sofa pills still in hand. "I need to think. I need to understand. Why would you do this?" Jake knelt beside me, and for a moment I saw real anguish in his eyes. "Mom, it's not what you think." "Then what is it? Help me understand why my daughter-in-law has been drugging me. Why my son let her—" "You were struggling," Emma interjected. "The confusion, the memory issues, we were trying to help." "By giving me medication that causes confusion?" I laughed bitterly. "How helpful." Carol chose that moment to play her hand. "Tonya, you're clearly overwhelmed. Perhaps it's time to consider that facility Emma mentioned. Somewhere safe where professionals can help you. Sunshine Manor." I stood slowly, still clutching the pills. "Yes, Emma mentioned that. Said you'd take care of the house while I got help. How convenient. Someone needs to manage things, Carol pressed. You're not capable anymore. Because you made me incapable. The pills rattled as my hand genuinely shook with rage. But I'm clear now. 3 weeks without your tea and my mind is crystal clear. I moved toward the home office and they followed like wolves stalking wounded prey. At the desk, I pulled out the power of attorney documents I'd photographed days earlier. Is this what you need me to sign? Give you control. I picked up a pen with trembling fingers. Maybe I should. Maybe you're right. I can't even keep the utilities on. Mom, Jake said urgently, just sign the papers. We'll take care of everything. I looked at my son, really looked at him. Somewhere beneath the greed and entitlement was the boy I'd raised buried, but perhaps not entirely gone. Tell me the truth first. All of it. Emma grabbed the papers. Just sign them, Tonya. Make this easy on everyone. The truth? I repeated, pen hovering over the signature line. Jake broke. Maybe it was the cold or the stress or some vestige of conscience, but words poured out of him. It was supposed to be simple. Emma's family has connections in elder care. You'd go somewhere nice for a few months, we'd manage the house and finances, and when you came back, everything would be better organized. But then we saw how much you really had, Emma added, apparently deciding honesty might close the deal. The investments, the properties, the development deals. More than Jake ever told me. So you decided to take it all. You don't need it, Emma snapped. You're one person living in this huge house sitting on millions while we struggle with loans and debts. Debts. I looked at Jake. What debts? His face crumpled. I made some bad investments. Borrowed from the wrong people. Emma's gambling. We needed money fast. My gambling? Emma whirled on him. You're the one who got suspended from the firm. Suspended. I set down the pen. Jake, what did you do? He embezzled client funds, Carol said coldly. Tried to cover the gambling debts. Got caught. The partners gave him a choice: pay it back quietly or face prosecution. The truth was uglier than I'd imagined. My successful lawyer son was a thief and a fraud. His wife was a con artist, and I'd been their mark all along. How much? I asked quietly. 800,000, Jake whispered. I laughed. Actually laughed. So you decided to steal from your mother instead of asking for help. You would have said no. You would have been disappointed. I'm disappointed now. I stood, pills scattering across the floor. You drugged me. You tried to have me committed. You stole from me. And we'll keep doing it. Emma snarled, mask fully off now. One way or another, we're getting that money. Sign the papers or things get worse. Worse? I pulled out my phone. Worse than poisoning your mother-in-law. What are you doing? Jake tried to grab the phone, but I stepped back. I'm done being confused, I said clearly. Done playing the victim, done pretending I don't know exactly what you've been doing. I hit play on one of the recordings. Emma's voice filled the room. Yes, I have the pills. The doctor said increasing the dose would increase confusion. Emma lunged for the phone, but I was ready, sidestepping her easily. I have copies, I informed them. Uploaded to the cloud, sent to my lawyer, and about to be sent to the police unless you do exactly what I say. You're bluffing, Carol said, but uncertainty colored her voice. Margaret Foster has been my lawyer for 15 years, I said calmly. She filed an emergency injunction this morning preventing any transfer of my assets. She also reported the fraudulent documents to the state attorney's office. Oh, and that private investigator I hired, he's been following you for a week. It was partly bluff. The investigator was Margaret's idea, not yet hired, but they didn't know that. You can't prove anything, Emma said desperately. Can I? I smiled coldly. Jake, did you know your wife has done this before Elizabeth Connor? That's her real name, isn't it? Emma wanted in Arizona and Nevada for elder fraud. Emma went white. Even Carol looked shocked. That's right, I continued. My confusion didn't stop me from doing research. Carol Matthews is really Caroline Vega with quite a record of her own. Funny how Jake never met Emma's family before the wedding. Almost like they were hiding something. Mom, Jake said brokenly, I didn't know. No, you didn't wonder why your wife was so eager to marry a lawyer with an elderly parent, why she pushed so hard to get into my finances. You were either complicit or stupid, and frankly, I'm not sure which is worse. My phone rang. Margaret's name appeared on the screen. Excuse me, I said politely. I need to take this. Hello, Margaret. Yes, they're all here. Yes, I have it all recorded. How long? 15 minutes? Perfect. I hung up and faced my would-be captors. The police are on their way. You have two choices. Leave now and maybe avoid immediate arrest, or stay and definitely get hauled away in handcuffs. You can't kick us out, Jake said weakly. I live here. No, you visit here. Your legal residence is the apartment you're about to be evicted from for non-payment. Oh yes, I know about that too. Did you really think I'd leave my finances accessible to someone who'd steal from his own clients? Carol was already moving toward the stairs. Emma, we need to go. Not without the money. Emma grabbed the unsigned papers. You have to help us. Jake will go to prison. Jake made his choices, I said coldly. And you made yours when you decided to poison me. It wasn't poison, Emma screamed. Just something to make you manageable. Manageable, I repeated. Like a dog you're training. Except you forgot one thing. I'm not a dog. I'm the woman who built a real estate empire from nothing, who survived widowhood and loss, who raised a son I thought I knew. You picked the wrong mark. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Carol ran upstairs to grab belongings. Emma stood frozen, calculating her odds. Jake just stared at me with devastated eyes. Mom, he whispered. Please, I'm your son. My son died somewhere between law school and this moment, I said, my heart shattering even as I stood firm. I don't know who you are, but you're not the boy I raised. The sirens were almost here. Emma made her decision, bolting for the stairs. Jake, we have to go. But Jake didn't move. He stood there in my cold house, surrounded by evidence of his betrayal, and finally seemed to see what he'd become. I'm sorry, he said. Sorry you got caught, I corrected. Sorry your scheme failed. Sorry you chose a con artist over your mother, but not sorry for what you did to me. I never meant for it to go this far. Yes, you did. Every step, every lie, every pill in my tea, you meant all of it. You just never meant to face consequences. The police cars pulled up outside, lights flashing through the frost-covered windows. Emma's screech of frustration echoed from upstairs as she realized escape was impossible. One last chance, Jake said desperately. Call them off. I'll go to rehab, get help, make this right. You can't make this right, I said quietly. You can't unpoison me. You can't unsteal from me. You can't unbreak my heart. All you can do is face what you've done. The doorbell rang. The police had arrived. I'll testify, Jake said suddenly. Against Emma, against Carol. I'll tell them everything. I'm counting on it, I said, moving to answer the door. It might be the first honest thing you've done in years. As I reached for the door handle, I paused and looked back at my son one last time. I loved you more than life itself. Remember that when you're sitting in a cell wondering how you got there. I loved you, and it wasn't enough to keep you from destroying us both. Then I opened the door to let justice in. Detective Patricia Holloway was exactly the kind of officer I'd hoped for, sharp-eyed, methodical, and unimpressed by tears or excuses. She arrived with 4 uniformed officers and a forensics team, transforming my violated home into a crime scene. Mrs. Patterson, she said, notebook already out. Your lawyer filled me in on the basics, but I need to hear it from you. I handed her my phone. Everything's on here. Recordings, photos, documentation. But first you need to know about the pills. Emma's scream from upstairs interrupted us. I'm not going anywhere. This is my house. My husband lives here. Detective Holloway nodded to two officers who headed upstairs. Then she focused on me. Tell me about the pills. I showed her the bottle, explaining about the tea, the confusion, the medical gaslighting. As I spoke, Jake sank onto the couch, head in his hands. He looked like a broken doll, all his arrogance evaporated. We'll need blood and hair samples, the detective said. These substances can be detected weeks after ingestion. Who else knew about this? I can answer that, Jake said suddenly. Everyone turned to stare at him. I'll tell you everything. Jake, shut up. Emma's voice carried down the stairs, followed by sounds of struggle. Don't say another word. But something had shifted in my son. Maybe it was seeing his mother prepared to send him to prison, or maybe it was finally understanding the monster he'd married. Either way, the dam broke. Emma's real name is Elizabeth Connor. He began, his voice hollow. I didn't know that until recently. She targeted me at a legal conference 2 years ago. Found out I had a widowed mother with assets. Jake. Emma appeared at the top of the stairs, flanked by officers. Her perfect facade had cracked completely, mascara streaming, designer clothes disheveled. You spineless coward. She introduced me to online gambling. Jake continued, ignoring her. Said it was just for fun. But she knew exactly how to hook me, which sites to use, how to hide the losses. When I was in deep enough, she showed her true colors. Detective Holloway was recording everything. How deep? 800,000. I borrowed from loan sharks, then tried to cover it with client funds. The partners found out, gave me 30 days to repay or face charges. So you turned to your mother's money, the detective said. It was Emma's idea. She said Tonya was old, wouldn't need all that wealth. We could manage it better, pay off the debts, everyone wins. Jake laughed bitterly. She made it sound so reasonable, like we were helping. By poisoning her, Detective Holloway's voice could have frozen fire. The pills were Emma's doctor friend, some psychiatrist who lost his license but still practices underground. He gave her a cocktail that mimics dementia symptoms. Confusion, memory loss, agitation. Undetectable unless you're specifically looking for it. I felt vindicated and heartbroken simultaneously. My son was confessing everything, but only because he'd been caught. Carol appeared next, dragged down by officers despite her protests about diplomatic immunity, which made no sense and suggested deeper delusions or more lies. Without her designer armor, she looked like what she was, a career criminal caught in her latest scheme. I want a lawyer, she spat. You'll get one, Detective Holloway assured her. After we book you for elder abuse, fraud, conspiracy, and false imprisonment. False imprisonment, I asked. Changing the locks to prevent a homeowner from entering their own property, the detective explained. Among other things, we take elder abuse very seriously in Connecticut. Emma was dragged past us toward the door, still screaming. This is entrapment. She recorded us illegally. Jake, tell them about your mother's mental problems. The only mental problems I had were caused by your pills, I said calmly. Emma lunged toward me, but the officers held her back. You stupid old woman. You could have just died quietly. We gave you every chance to go peacefully. Is that a confession to attempted murder? Detective Holloway asked with interest. Emma's face went white as she realized what she'd said. I want a lawyer. Bit late for that, the detective noted, nodding to the officers. Take her in. As they dragged Emma and Carol out, I heard my neighbors gathering on the street. Dorothy's voice carried clearly. I knew something was wrong. Poor Tonya. Poor Tonya. If only they knew how far from poor I was about to be. The forensics team worked through the house-bagging evidence. The pills, the forged documents, computers, phones, everything that could build the case. Jake sat with another detective, spilling every detail of their scheme. The plan was to have her declared incompetent, he was saying. Emma had a judge in her pocket from another case. We'd get conservatorship control, all her assets, stick her in Sunshine Manor. What about the house? The detective asked. Sell it. Emma already had buyers lined up. Cash deal, no questions asked. They'd split $8 million for a $12 million property. My house was worth $12 million. Even I hadn't realized property values had risen so much. No wonder they'd been so desperate to steal it. Detective Holloway returned to me. We'll need you to come to the station for a full statement. But first, is there anywhere safe you can stay? This house is a crime scene now. She can stay with me, Dorothy said from the doorway. Dear, loyal Dorothy who'd watched this nightmare unfold. I've got plenty of room. Thank you, I said, genuinely touched. But I have a suite at the Marriott. I booked it yesterday when I realized things might get complicated. Smart woman, the detective approved. We'll post an officer here overnight, make sure no one returns to destroy evidence. What about Jake? I asked, watching my son with the other detective. That depends on his cooperation level and the district attorney. But given what he's confessing to, he's looking at significant charges. Embezzlement, elder abuse, conspiracy to commit fraud, false imprisonment. Even with cooperation, he'll likely serve time. Good. The word rang in my head cold and satisfying. Good. Margaret arrived as they were preparing to transport Jake. My lawyer friend looked like an avenging angel in her power suit briefcase in hand, fury in her eyes. Tonya, she said, embracing me carefully. Are you all right? Better than I've been in months, I said truthfully, clear-headed and vindicated. I've filed emergency motions to freeze all accounts Emma and Jake had access to, Margaret informed me. The house title is safe, thanks to that trust we set up last year. And I've got a forensic accountant ready to trace every penny they stole. Jake was led past us in handcuffs, the final blow to any maternal feelings I had left. He stopped in front of me, tears streaming down his face. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know, I said simply, but sorry doesn't erase what you did. Will you ever forgive me? I considered the question honestly. Maybe someday. After you've served your time, made real amends, proven you've changed. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean saving you from consequences. I understand, he whispered. No, I said firmly, you don't. But maybe someday you will. They led him away, my only child, in handcuffs he'd earned through greed and betrayal. I waited for the grief to overwhelm me, but all I felt was tired relief. The house emptied slowly as evidence was collected and statements taken. By evening, I was in my hotel suite wrapped in a plush robe, watching the news cover the story. Local woman exposes elder fraud ring. The headline read. They showed Emma and Carol's mugshots, then footage of Jake being led into the courthouse. The reporter mentioned my development company, my success, the millions they'd tried to steal. But they didn't capture the real story. They didn't show the nights I'd lain awake wondering if I was actually losing my mind. The terror of feeling my thoughts slip away, not knowing it was chemical rather than natural. The heartbreak of discovering your child would poison you for money. Margaret called with updates. Emma's fingerprints had matched several open cases across multiple states. She was looking at decades in prison. Carol, too, had warrants in 3 states. They'd been a team mother and daughter preying on elderly victims through their children. Jake's lawyer wants to discuss a plea deal, Margaret informed me. He's willing to testify against them both in exchange for a lighter sentence. How light? 5 to 7 instead of 15 to 20. I closed my eyes. 5 to 7 years. My son would emerge in his 40s career, destroyed marriage over reputation in ruins. Was that justice? Was it enough? Tell them I won't object if the DA agrees, I said finally. But I want restitution, every penny returned plus damages. Already on it. The beach house Jake bought is in his name. We can seize that his car's everything. Emma had offshore accounts we're tracking. You'll be made whole financially. Financially whole, emotionally shattered, but alive and free, which was more than Emma and Carol had planned for me. I ordered room service and ate alone, CNN playing in the background. Tomorrow there would be more statements, more paperwork, more decisions. But tonight, I sat in peaceful silence, no longer afraid in my own home, no longer questioning my own mind. The pills had been flushed, tested, cataloged as evidence. The lies had been exposed. The predators were in cages where they belonged, and I was still standing bruised but not broken. My phone rang, an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, then curiosity won. Tonya. A male voice, nervous and young. This is James Chen from the Hartford Courant. I'm covering the elder fraud case, and I wondered if you'd like to tell your side of the story. My side of the story, the victim's perspective, the survivor's tale. Yes, I said, surprising myself. Yes, I think I would, but not as a victim, as a warning, and as proof that no matter how old we get, we're never too old to fight back. That's perfect. When can we meet? Tomorrow, I decided, after I finish burning my son's childhood photos. I was kidding about the photos, mostly, but the reporter didn't need to know that. What he needed to know, what everyone needed to know, was that Tonya Patterson didn't go quietly into any good night. She raged, she fought, and she won. Even if winning felt like losing everything that mattered. 6 months later, I stood in my restored master bedroom, sunlight streaming through windows that no longer bore frost. The house was warm again, the utilities long since restored, but more importantly, it was mine. Truly, safely, legally mine. The doorbell rang and I heard my housekeeper Rosa answer it. I'd hired her not because I needed help, but because I'd learned the value of having trustworthy people around. Rosa was a retired nurse who'd cared for her own mother through real dementia. She understood vigilance without paranoia. Mrs. Patterson, Rosa called. Your guests are here for the foundation meeting. I smoothed my silk blouse and headed downstairs. The living room was full of women all over 50, all survivors of elder fraud. We'd found each other through news coverage of my case, and together we'd formed the Patterson Foundation for Elder Protection. Tonya, Barbara Weinstein, embraced me. She'd lost her home to a grandson's scheme but fought back in court. You look wonderful. Clear-headed living suits me, I said, meaning it. We settled around my dining table, now restored with my grandmother's antiques retrieved from storage. Dorothy was there, of course, serving as our treasurer. Margaret provided legal guidance. Even Detective Holloway attended when she could, offering law enforcement perspective. First order of business, I announced, pulling out a letter. Jake's restitution payment arrived, another $100,000 toward the foundation. The women applauded. Jake had been sentenced to 6 years with possibility of parole in 4. From prison, he worked a job program, sending every penny to pay back what he'd stolen. His letters came weekly too, which I read but didn't answer. Not yet. Emma had gotten 25 years. The investigation revealed 11 elderly victims across 5 states, 2 of whom had died under suspicious circumstances after signing over their estates. She would likely never see freedom again. Carol received 15 years. At 73, it was effectively a life sentence. She'd screamed about injustice until the very end, never acknowledging her victim's suffering. The good news, Margaret announced, is that our lobbying efforts worked. The state legislature passed the Elder Protection Act with enhanced penalties for family-perpetrated fraud. More applause. We were making real change, turning our pain into protection for others. After the meeting, I walked Dorothy to the door. Thank you for everything, I said, meaning it deeply. You saved my life by bearing witness. You saved your own life, she corrected. I just refused to look away. Alone again, I wandered through my house, each room reclaimed and renewed. The master bedroom where Carol had slept was now my sanctuary again. The office where I'd discovered their forgeries housed my expanding business files. I'd taken on 3 major development projects, my supposed decline having been exposed as criminal fiction. The doorbell rang again. Rosa had left for the day, so I answered it myself. A young woman stood on my porch, familiar yet strange. It took me a moment to place her. Sarah Chen, Jake's former secretary. What brings you here? I'm sorry to bother you, Mrs. Patterson. I know this is awkward, but I wanted you to know some things about Jake, before. I hesitated, then stepped aside. Come in. We sat in the kitchen and Sarah told me about my son's descent. How he'd started taking cases he would have once refused. How Emma would call constantly demanding money. How Jake would emerge from those calls shaking. I'm not excusing what he did, Sarah said carefully. But I think you should know he fought it at first. Emma broke him down systematically. She threatened to leave him to expose the gambling, to ruin him completely unless he complied. He could have asked me for help, I said. She convinced him you'd disown him. She said mothers always choose money over disappointing children. She was very persuasive. I thought about Emma's silver tongue, her practiced manipulation. Yes, she would have been persuasive, but Jake had still chosen greed over trust. Why tell me this now? I asked. Sarah pulled out an envelope. He asked me to give you this when I felt the time was right. Not his prison letters, something he wrote before the trial. He said if you never read it, he'd understand. After she left, I stared at the envelope for an hour before opening it. Jake's handwriting, shakier than I remembered, covered 10 pages. Mom, it began. I'm writing this before I know my fate, but after I know my crimes. I won't ask for forgiveness. I forfeited that right when I let Emma put those pills in your tea. But I need you to know who I was before I became this monster, because I'm terrified I'll forget. He wrote about memories I'd forgotten. How he'd saved his allowance to buy me flowers after Dad died. How he'd transferred from Yale to UConn his junior year to be closer to home, though he'd told me it was for a better program. How he'd turned down a job in New York because he couldn't imagine living that far from me. Emma saw all of this and used it, he wrote. She knew I loved you, so she made that love a weakness. Every boundary I set, she broke. Every protection I tried to maintain, she undermined. I'm not saying I'm innocent. I made every wrong choice. But I need you to know that somewhere under this criminal, your son still exists. Or existed. I'm not sure anymore. The letter went on detailing his regrets, his shame, his desperate hope that someday he could make amends. Not through money, but through becoming someone worthy of being my son again. I'm studying in here, he wrote. Psychology, addiction counseling, elder care law. If I ever get out, I want to help prevent what I did. I know it doesn't erase anything, but maybe it honors who you tried to raise me to be. I set the letter down and cried for the first time in months. Not for the criminal he'd become, but for the son I'd lost. The boy who'd saved allowance for flowers was gone, but maybe something could grow from his ashes. The next day I wrote back. Just one line. Show me who you'll become, not who you were. Life continued. The foundation grew, helping dozens of families recognize and combat elder fraud. My business thrived with 3 new associates who'd proven themselves trustworthy. I dated occasionally, nothing serious, just dinner with men who appreciated a woman with silver hair and steel spine. One evening, as I hosted a dinner party for actual friends, not false family, someone asked if I regretted exposing Jake. No, I said without hesitation. I regret that it was necessary, but not that I did it. Love isn't letting someone destroy you. Love is holding them accountable so they might someday be worthy of the feeling. But the pain, another friend pressed. Losing your only child. I lost him the day he chose to poison me, I said simply. Everything after was just acknowledging the loss. The conversation moved on, but I found myself on the deck later looking at the stars. Robert would have been proud of how I'd handled things. Heartbroken about Jake, but proud of my strength. I protected what we built, I whispered to the sky. And I'll keep protecting others. That's my promise. The next morning brought a call from Detective Holloway. Another family saved because they'd recognized the warning signs from my story. An elderly father protected from a scheming daughter-in-law. A fortune preserved, a mind kept clear. You did that, she told me. Your willingness to speak up to fight publicly saved them. After the call, I stood in my kitchen, Emma's drugged tea a distant nightmare. I was 65 now, officially elderly by some standards, but I ran miles every morning, managed millions in development deals, and fought predators who mistook age for weakness. They'd tried to steal my mind, my home, my dignity. Instead, they'd forged me into something stronger, a protector, a warrior, a survivor who refused to let others fall into the same trap. The doorbell rang. Rosa answered, then called out, Mrs. Patterson, there's a young couple here. They say they're looking for help. Their son has been acting strange since he married. I straightened my shoulders and went to meet them. Another family to save another predator, to expose another elder to protect. This was my life now, born from betrayal, but built on purpose. As I listened to their story so familiar, it made my chest ache. I thought about Jake's letter. Maybe someday he'd emerge worthy of forgiveness. Maybe not. But either way, I'd turned our tragedy into triumph for others. Tell me everything, I said to the worried couple. Start from the beginning, and don't worry. I know exactly what to look for. They began their tale, and I took notes, my mind sharp, my purpose clear. Emma had tried to fog my thoughts with chemicals. Jake had tried to break my heart with betrayal. Carol had tried to steal my home with cunning. They'd all failed because they'd underestimated one crucial thing, the power of a woman who'd survived loss before and refused to be diminished by it again. The meeting lasted hours. By the end, the couple had a plan, resources, and hope. They left with my cell number and promise of support. Standing in my doorway watching them drive away, I thought about legacy. Jake would have inherited money. Instead, through his betrayal, I'd found a different inheritance to leave knowledge, protection, and proof that we're never too weak to fight back. Mrs. Patterson, Rosa appeared beside me. Your afternoon appointment called. The reporter from 60 Minutes. They want to feature the Foundation's work. Tell them yes, I said, closing the door on the past and opening it to a future of purpose. It's time more people heard our stories. That night, I stood in my master bedroom, no longer afraid of who might be sleeping in my bed. The house was secure, my mind was clear, and my heart, while scarred, still beat with purpose. I'd lost a son but gained a mission, lost trust but gained wisdom, lost innocence but gained the power to prevent others' losses. Looking in the mirror, I saw not a victim, but a victor. Gray-haired, wrinkled, and fierce. They'd tried to erase me, but I'd written myself larger than ever. Tomorrow there would be more battles, more families to save, more predators to stop. But tonight, I slept peacefully in my own bed, in my own home, with my own mind intact. The woman in my robe had been Carol the Invader, but the woman in my mirror, that was Tonya Patterson, survivor, warrior, and protector of those who couldn't yet protect themselves. A purpose, a mission, a legacy that would outlast any inheritance. And that was the greatest revenge of all. Life lesson. The moment we stop accepting disrespect is the moment we reclaim our power. True strength isn't measured by what we endure silently, but by our courage to stand up and say, "No more," even when it costs us everything we thought we couldn't live without. Family isn't defined by blood, but by those who treat us with dignity and love. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give ourselves is the strength to stand alone rather than accept counterfeit love. Our worth isn't diminished by age, it's refined by it. And when someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time, because love without respect is just manipulation wearing a familiar face. Dear friends, if this story touched your heart, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and self-respect? What would you have done in Tonya's place? Please share your experiences in the comments below. And if you found value in this story of survival and strength, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of triumph over betrayal. Share this with someone who needs to remember their own power today. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Remember, you're never too old to fight back, never too settled to start over, and never too loving to demand respect. Until next time, stay strong and keep believing in your worth.